It's going to be salty, whatever it is.
Hope so.
So the Senate has, I guess, after several years, advanced a pipeline-related bill, sort of, through a committee, but House Republicans say a lot of the most important parts were stripped out of it. Why are you advancing this now, 4 years into the process?
Well, I think we're at a point where we have some language that we can all agree on. I think you know as well as I do that to advance a bill you have to have 26 votes. So we've gotten to a point where we have 26 people willing to step up and advance some property rights legislation. I can't speak to the House's opinion of anything. I don't typically ask their opinion when I'm working on legislation with my team.
The Speaker told us this morning that
The House will not be doing the fertilizer bill for the second year in a row that you have.
Sure.
What are your thoughts?
I don't try to tell the House how to do their job. I suppose the House can be entitled to their wrong opinion. I believe wholeheartedly that the bill we passed doesn't prevent anybody from seeking justice if they're damaged by a company. But I also believe that to have a proper system of justice, we have to make sure that individuals or companies can't be sued for following the law. And that's the situation we face right now, is that we have a company being sued for following the law. And I don't think that I want Iowa to be a place where justice is denied folks when they follow the law. So it's disappointing and I haven't spoken to anybody in the House, it's disappointing if that's the case, because I believe wholeheartedly that we need to have a justice system that is just.
Speaker Grassley says you guys are starting to make some headway with your SSA negotiations. Can you give an insight into what that final package might look like?
Yeah, no, I can't give insight on the final package because it's not final yet. But absolutely, we are making headway. I would anticipate we'll have those numbers established and passed next week. Given the way that the law is written, the fact that we didn't pass within 30 days of the governor's budget defaulted it to zero. I don't think anybody believes that that's the final number. I think the Senate and the governor set a floor of 2%. The House upped that ante to 2.25% and some other items. I think you'll find something being passed next week that would not withstand that 30-day deadline, and we'll get something passed out this coming week. It's important that we waited for the revenue estimating conference from March. We know that commodity prices are down and it impacts our overall revenues for the state. So we needed to see where that was, to see the number that's going out for school funding. But suffice it to say that it'll be somewhere, I think, between that 2 and 2.25%.
to the point about the state economy, can you give us a reaction to President Trump imposing 10% tariffs on imports? And do you think that will have an impact on prices for Iowans, or just talk about what you expect from that?
Far be it from me to speak for President Trump, but of course I think the legislature needs to be mindful in our budgeting and in the work that we do of what those tariffs mean for Iowans and for our state revenues. I think all Iowans want us to take care of what we know and what we don't know, and try and plan for those contingencies. We don't know what it's going to do to us yet, and I think, but I think we have to be mindful of it as we plan our budgets and move forward.
Can you explain give us some insight in your head on that? What does mindful mean? And I appreciate that so much is uncertain. Do you have to look at temporarily extending unemployment benefits? Is there anything proactively you have to do because of that?
I don't think there's anything proactively we have to do with it. What it does is it impacts the cost of goods, right? If tariffs come back on folks, I think one of the biggest ones we're already seeing is that the used car market is heating up, right? So it's going to cost Iowans more to buy a car. What that does to the state, honestly, what that does to the state revenues costs more than the sales tax on it costs more as well. So it's less about the state's budget on that front than it is about individual budgets. But on the backside of that, you're seeing it in the commodity prices right now. You're seeing ag products being impacted by it. Agriculture is one of Iowa's biggest industries, right? And so that will impact future budgets, and we need to be cautious in our spending based on that. I think we have to be as conservative as possible, because those costs are going to be compounding year over year, and we have to know that impacts what our revenues will be in the coming years.
as it's impacting potentially revenues in the coming years, does that impact how you're thinking about tax policy? If it may change how much revenue the state is taking in and you're thinking about crafting future tax policy, how do you be mindful of that?
Well, I mean, you laid it out. We have a 5-year budget plan, and we're already taking all of those things into consideration as we think about revenue growth and those numbers that we put into forecasting into the future. And so, of course, it will impact how we look at crafting tax legislation. This year, we're not looking at income taxes, so it's less about the state budget. We're looking at property taxes, and property taxes are not necessarily dependent on that process, with the exception of ag land values, which are productivity based, so that goes out for a few years. But it's not affecting any tax policy we're working on right now, because we're not working on income tax policy that impacts the state's budget.
Speaking of the property tax stuff, I guess the bills got subs last week. Any updates on the conversations surrounding kind of that reform?
I think it's important that we get a lot of input on this. The bills that came out were complete overhauls of our property tax system, eliminating the rollbacks and really just revamping, modernizing, and promoting additional transparency in the process. We are, from both chambers, looking at that public input that's going to impact local governments are the ones that are going to be impacted by changes to our property tax system. So we want to take as much input from those folks as possible, so that we know that what we're doing, since we're doing it big and bold, we want to know that what we're doing is actually workable. And so we're the subcommittees were held. I'm sure both committee chairs are taking input right now on how that will all pan out. The products that were presented in those subcommittees probably aren't going to be the final products, because they are in the process of making the changes that are necessary to make those workable, and really to get a handle on what's become probably the biggest issue for voters in the state of Iowa, which is their property tax bill, and making sure that we get that under control at the same time that we're still providing those essential services from local governments.
The House and the Senate both have plans that would prevent local governments from having or maintaining DEI offices. The House version also includes some pieces on higher education, private colleges that participate in the Iowa tuition grant, community colleges. It seems like that bill, I believe, is in committee later today, but if it advances, both of those would pass the funnel. Do you have thoughts on which plan you'd like to go with?
I don't know which plan will move forward. I know bills are still alive and viable in both chambers of the House. I know that in the Senate, we have expressed concern about diving into those private colleges and universities, into their governance. They're not a government agency. So I believe that Senator Rosenboom expressed in subcommittee that would be removed, and I think that he'll stick with that. I do think it's important, and Republicans in general believe it's important that the local government, state government, that our government-funded colleges and universities are doing hiring based on merit, are advancing their policies based on merit, not on other qualities that don't necessarily provide for the best product for citizens of the state of Iowa. And so merit-based advancements are probably going to move forward. We have opportunities in both chambers to do that. We don't look at it as eliminating diversity, equity, or inclusion. We look at it as advancing merit.
Could you give us maybe a big picture overview of how you think Iowans should look at the work that's been done in the legislature leading up to this funnel, and then ahead at kind of what the major things are that are coming up that need to be finished before you can adjourn for the year?
I think everything that the Senate chamber, and again, I won't speak for the House. I've had several questions about what the House is doing. I can't speak for them. Everything that the Senate doing is with an eye on making Iowa the best place to live, work, and raise your family. So whether that means we're working on tax policy that helps Iowans keep more of their own money in their pockets, or whether it's looking at education policy that helps parents make the best decisions for their kids. Everything we're doing is working to make Iowa the best place to live, work, and raise your family. We want to be a place where people want to come. We want to be a place where businesses can thrive. I've had meetings with people who are talking about Iowa becoming an up-and-coming economic driver for the nation, and that's because we've changed tax policy to make us a destination state. That's our goal. So whatever it is we're looking at it, we look at it through the lens of Does this help Iowans with their businesses? Does it help them with their work? Does it help them with their family? Everything we're doing is with a lens towards that. So moving forward, those priorities that the Senate had at the beginning of session, property tax policy, working on healthcare availability, all of those priorities that we had at the beginning of session will still be our priorities, and we have bills that are live to make that happen.
Can you explain why a staffer flew out to Colorado for you to sign the gender identity bill instead of just waiting until the following Monday when you were back at the Capitol? I mean, the bill doesn't go into effect until July 1st anyway, so what was the rush and who paid for that staffer's travel?
Not the state of Iowa, and you would have to ask the governor's office why she wanted to sign it on Friday versus Monday.
The Department of Justice recently sent a letter to House and Senate Republicans regarding some concerns over the energy bill, specifically with the right of first refusal, potentially causing less competition, higher costs. What's kind of your response to that?
We have to have readily available energy for, going back to what we were just talking about, what are our priorities for the state? We have to have readily available energy to make Iowa an economic driver. Businesses need affordable, reliable energy in the state. Improving our energy policy is essential. Taking into account the conversation around ROFR, around right of first refusal, that's part of the conversation. I don't think it's in any way the major part of that conversation about making sure we have a reliable grid system and that we can keep costs under control for both residential and commercial uses. You'll see us continue to work on that energy policy as the year comes to a close.
Going back to property taxes, again, given the scope of the bill and where it is in the legislative process at this point, I guess, how important is it, or how much pressure is there to get that done this year, or is this going to be a conversation you think is going to bleed over into next year?
Honestly, I'd like to see it get done this year, but we want it done right rather than fast. That being said, there's been a lot of work go into this bill over the course of the last couple of years behind the scenes, trying to get at how we advance something that gets the revenues under control so that residents aren't being blindsided every single year when the market puts their assessments up. We want to make sure that market is still in place, but that local governments are constrained in their revenues. And so is it a priority to get done this session? For me, it's a priority to get done this session. But if it doesn't get done this session, it's because we didn't have all the details in place to get it done right.
The governor's preschool bill was on the Senate debate list at one point, and then it was pulled and not considered. Are you concerned at all about the funding shift that happens in that bill, and are you considering changes to it?
Yeah, so honestly, that was why it was pulled. There was some concerns about how that funding shift happened. Early Childhood Iowa was originally designed with the notion that local folks have different needs related to what their early childhood needs are, whether that's preschool, whether that's childcare availability. Every community looks different in what it needs in that preschool framework. And so when we come up with a bill that shifts those dollars into a one-size-fits-all, there were a lot of concerns coming out of, and not necessarily my district or pick your senator's district. It was everybody's district saying, but we use those funds to do this. How is that going to happen if it's shifted over into this other thing that we don't need? And so that original design being around local need was shifted in the governor's bill, and it caused some real concern. I'm not sure what the conversation looks like. I haven't had conversations with Senator Evans on what he's doing in the background, working with the governor's office. But I think everyone can acknowledge that the need for childcare in some form or fashion is an issue in every district. And so I think they'll work through some of those bugs. I don't know what the solution will be. No more questions?
When's the session gonna end?
You and me both. We want that answer. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Senator.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.